we have to go to understanding what natural law is about. And natural law is a universal, non-man-made, binding and immutable conditions that govern the consequences of behavior. It's also been known as karmic law. Natural law is a body of universal spiritual laws which acts as the governing dynamics of consciousness. When it comes to natural law, your belief is really irrelevant. It's like trying to play a game of chess without understanding how each of the chess pieces move. It's like being a pawn in the chessboard instead of the chess master who's moving the pawns on the chessboard. So that's how important this information is, and your belief is really irrelevant. Just like the laws of nature such as gravity, inertia, momentum, thermodynamics, or electromagnetism. Similar to such other phenomena of nature, the workings of natural law require no belief in order for them to be discovered and known. Natural law is discoverable. Natural law is verifiable through the method of the trivium, the scientific method of truth discovery. It's just that you will not see karma in action immediately. If you break natural law and it's not a scenario in a cartoon where, you break natural law and you step out of the house and then a tree falls on you and you die or something like that. It's way more complex. We don't get to see the effects immediately, but this is what our ancestors were trying to tell us in every culture across the world. This is what is the hidden realm, the realm which is not accessible to a mind which doesn't have the question why. Why is a very important question. So we often look back at philosophers like Søren Kierkegaard who have distilled this collective human disease into a quote. There are only two ways to be fooled. One is to believe what is not true, and the other is to refuse to accept what is true. So this says a lot about why we experience suffering in the world. Buddhism does not say life is suffering. It says it is suffering if you do not live by the code of this land, the real law, the capital LAW, which is natural law. So we'll briefly go into the brain structure and behavior. So brain health plays a critical role, and understanding how the brain works is a big part of understanding this allegory. So the three main complexes of the brain are the R complex, which facilitates basic survival functions. So the subconscious, it can also be called your subconscious. These are activities you do like digestion, breathing, instinct, and looking for food, gathering resources, the eating of food, the activities you do which are necessary for bodily health, like eating, pooping, everything. So the limbic system is human emotion, which is the most degenerated because it has been made into something which is either evil or it's being manipulated by what we call mass media and film. And the third part, which is the neocortex, the most recent part of the brain, the most the higher order thinking, which makes us separate from other animals, the animal kingdom. So if you get down to it, this is how the brain evolved. We started off with the brain stem, and then came the next layer, which is the mammalian brain, and then came the neocortex, or the higher order thinking. So when the left and right brain, when the brain is balanced, the left side of the brain is the masculine and the right side is the feminine. When they both are firing together, not one side dominant over the other. So if the right side, which is the masculine side, is dominant, it leads to master think, you dominating over others. Okay. And if the right side, which is the feminine, is the one which is dominant in you, you'll be like a slave, you'll be gullible, you'll believe whatever you're told without going through the process of logic, of trivium. And if you're too left brained, you cannot understand things like symbology, occult, numerology, and the parts which you need to understand it from the holistic side. This is what they mean by the holistic brain. The left side logical and the right side creative. It's the music and the lyrics coming together to create a perfect harmony, which is universe. Universe literally means one song. So that is what real unity consciousness is about, and that's what Harry stands for. He is these three aspects coming together in a balanced being. And that is what will save or take us out of darkness into a world of possibilities. The neocortex of the brain has two hemispheres. The left brain hemisphere largely facilitates logical and scientific thought, so language, mathematics. The right brain hemisphere largely facilitates creativity and compassion, nurturing, the divine feminine characteristics, the part which has compassion and empathy. And when both of these are in balance, the neocortex acts in its proper role as the executive command center of the brain, and true intelligence, intellect plus creativity, is born. So what we call AI is not really intelligence, it's just smart, just like our smartphones. So this is an important thing to understand when you're understanding the brain. There's no pineal, the pineal gland on the neocortex come online only when the left and right brain are balanced. You can do all the activities in the world, but if you're not balancing them both, you're doing too many left brain activities, you're indulging too much of left brain thinking or too much of right brain thinking. The R complex will take over the executive function of the brain, and the person will become ruled by selfishness and base desires, and develop a personality based in domination and control. So you need to recognize which part of the spectrum you are at. Like most of us are either in the dominator mindset or in the slave mindset. So once you recognize where you are, or you'll have different aspects of you in different left brain or right brain. So you have to understand what it is, and understanding that will help you bring them into balance. Because too much of the left brain or too much of the right brain is not a good thing. We want a good balance of both. We want the firing on all cylinders. For human beings, right brain hemisphere becomes dominant, the limbic system will take over, and the person will become ruled by their own emotions and develop a personality based on submissiveness and naivety. So this is the schism. This is the real divide. There's no left or right, people. There's no left or right. There's no political spectrum. This is the real divide which they have caused by their mind control. And these have led to a lot of disasters and upcoming will lead to a lot of upcoming disasters. The right brain has been used to make people submissive and to coerce them into things they don't really want to do, because they have bought into the lie, they have bought into the mind control. So the left brain hemisphere becomes chronically dominant. The R complex will take over. This is a reptile brain. So this is where the master thing comes, the dominator. This leads to them believing that the whole universe was a grand accident, rigid skepticism, scientism, atheism, solipsism, moral relativism, social Darwinism, and nihilism, which I've added here because that's also part of the problem. And if you're too right brain dominant, you can be very easily manipulated, you're gullible, you uh, like to follow orders, you have a false sense of security, and this is, most women are over here and most men are over here in our society. And I'm not generalizing here, I'm just saying that most men, this is what I've observed, this is the patriarch father figure and the mother figure, if you break it down into the current scenario. So this is a general mindset of someone who is left brain dominant will hold, and this is the right brain. The universe is a grand accident. There is no creator, therefore there is no underlying intelligence in creation, nature. There's no such thing as spiritual, moral, natural law. Man's law, which has to be written into existence, is the only thing which is valid. Man can dictate the law for all beings on this universe. I'm adding my own, but you get the drift. Existence has no purpose than to continue to exist. Most of them consider existence itself a pain, and these are the hallmarks of scientism, atheism, and total socialist thinking that the government will take care of them. This basically stems from their own issues with their parents. They probably had a mother figure who was replaced in proxy by the government, and they think the government's going to save them. And the other side of the spectrum is determinism. This is believing that God determines everything, there is no free will, and since God controls everything, what can be changed? You can't change anything. Action is ultimately meaningless. So these are the hallmarks of people who have very staunch religious beliefs, who have religious extremists, and people who are completely bought into a organized religion, a cult, in my words. So this is where it's important. Like, both of these are extremes. The truth is, there is something called natural law, which is predetermined. These are the rules of the game. And there is something called free will, which is the random component, which each of us have. And understanding that we have free will is one of the biggest epiphanies you can have, and this is what happens with the sorting hat as well in Harry Potter. So even though his the natural law component, the deterministic component in his stars was going to put him in Slytherin, because he was literally a Horcrux of Voldemort. So he had Slytherin. Voldemort was a descendant of Salazar Slytherin himself. So there is this bloodline connection, and this basically, so even though he wanted to, so Harry wanted to be in Gryffindor, so it took his free will. He didn't put him in something he didn't want to be in. So that's what the free will component is about, and that's what this sorting hat is there to teach us in Harry Potter. So we have to get to nature versus nurture, because what is it, right? Like, what makes us evil? So did Harry become a bad person even though he was a part of the soul of the most evil person was inside him all this time? So which one is it? What is human nature? Are we good or are we evil? Human nature is neither inherently good nor inherently evil. Instead, we should consider the operating conditions or the environment in which human beings exist, which influence behavior to a great extent, thus creating the current human condition. So this is actually a very, very profound statement because it's not even considered in modern so-called education systems, in quotes. So our condition is not evil, nor is it good. We are not responsible for the programming we received as children, but as adults, we are 100% responsible for fixing them. Human beings are programmable. Just like a computer can be formatted with a certain operating system, which government is also a religion. So most of us are programmed into this belief that we need a government, we need a belief in an external authority to govern us, else we cannot control ourselves. So that is the biggest lie. Human beings are programmable, much like computers. Like a computer, if a human being has a bad file system, conditions during the child's formative years, formative, a bad operating system, culture, a bad software programs, erroneous, rigid, and dogmatic beliefs, usually found in religion, their output, behavior on the screen of life will also be bad and will contribute to deteriorating conditions on a mass scale. Like a computer, the behavior of a human being will largely depend upon its programming, the quality of the information put into it, which enables it to process and create efficiently. So this is what it means when garbage goes in, garbage goes out. You have been given bad information, you have been given wrong information, a lot of garbage has gone in. So part of the work here is actually take the garbage out, quality in, not garbage in anymore, and get quality out. We get the required conditions to manifest. So this is actually the process of how our reality is built in a very, very simple diagram. The first step is knowledge, or the lack of knowledge, which can lead to ignorance. This constitutes potential knowledge that may have been gathered, processed, understood, and acted upon. So this constitutes the entire. We actually have access to this right now. We are at peak Kali Yuga, but we have access to knowledge. Taking in this knowledge leads to understanding. Take in the material from different sources and then process it to understand or come to your own decisions on what your actions should be. And these leads to action in the physical world, human behavior, how each individual's behavior is based upon the quality of the decision-making processes, which in turn are based upon the quality of their available information. So people are the way they are because we are in a state of negative knowledge. We are so backlogged with what has happened here, what the truth is, that it's affecting the whole system here. The foundation itself is in shambles. So the result is obviously you cannot build a house without a strong foundation. You're going to have only chaos. There's not going to be order because you don't have the basics right. So that's a huge part of the problem. So a lot of the problem solving which people do are in the plane of effects, which is the physical world where it's already been manifested. And there's actually no power to affect change here. This is where human consciousness is trapped in. All the solutions are trying to be executed over here instead of over here, the plane of causality, the mental world, the why is this a certain way, why aren't people using crypto yet, why aren't people disconnecting and not funding the Federal Reserve systems, why are they still continuing to give their money in the form of taxes? Why are they continuing to give that energy away? Why are they doing that? Why aren't they finding other ways to circumvent it? So this goes into the eighth principle. So when we say we don't care, it's actually a very satanic thing if you really think about it, because care is a generative principle. So you only do something when you care about it. So care comes from the heart. It comes from from a balanced brain in harmony with the heart, which is, that's why it's denoted in the color green. It's the color of nature. The world is the way that it is because most people do not care enough, even if they say they want things to be different, to change it through their actions. So people still continue to believe in the same thing. The weird ritualistic stuff which has been happening over the past 2 years. So what are we spending our time? Are you spending time reading the right books? There is something called the right books, because if you really want to understand the truth of the world and you go to the wrong sources, you will get pulled into black holes. These are not rabbit holes. When you're really searching for the truth, you go through rabbit holes. That's why it's called a rabbit hole, because you always come out the other side and you realize how these two stories are connected. So there's always, so you don't want to go into black holes. You want to use your discernment. That's where understanding and watching Mark Passio really helps. Things you should be asking yourself are, what am I spending my time on and what am I paying my attention to? What kind of quality am I getting in return of these investments? When am I spending hours watching reels? What am I getting out of that? Can I use my phone to create something which will not just get me money, but will tell more people about this? Can I spend a couple of hours every day, in spite of having a full-time job, to dedicate in knowing the truth, read a book about something, listen to a lecture about something, do the effort to actually break this illusion we are in, as opposed to continuing to buy into it every day and supporting it every day. So there's a very few people who are actually discerning information. This process actually involves disconnecting from poisoned information streams when you come to know it's poisoned. So you come to know something is not right, you stop feeding into it, right? You stop letting that feed you. You stop consuming content which has Kylie Jenner and Kim Kardashian on it. You unfollow people who are peddling the fake health narrative. You know, why are you supporting organizations which make people wear masks? So natural law is known as the law of cause and effect, the law of karma, the moral law, the golden rule, and the law of attraction. Let me just put it this way. If there are beings who we would consider advanced or spiritual, or who we would look up to in terms of not the kind of gods we read about, the little g gods, I call them, in our books, who have flaws and who break natural law and who don't actually understand right from wrong, even though they are so-called gods. So I'm not talking about those beings. I'm talking about really good human beings. A good human being is one who understands right from wrong. Harry Potter is ultimately about. It was about natural law. It was about understanding that you can't, just because you have a magic wand and you can do anything you want, you can't go killing people you don't like. Okay. So, I mean, there was a way to, even Harry Potter has its flaws. People still believed in a government, and they had a form of external authority. The Muggles were not even aware of this, uh, that the wizards and the magical world actually existed. So that's kind of like the shadow government. And the wizards who knew about the shadow government and whatever this magical world is, were the wizards. So that's a very good allegory of what the situation is. And Harry Potter actually taught us what right and wrong is in a very subconscious way. It gave us a deep understanding of morality and principles concerning the distinction between right and wrong behavior. And this is the heart of natural law. This is what it is about. If each of us understood this, we most of us already behave this way with our friends and family, people who we consider our friends and family, and not the universal family, which is all of humanity. Individualism in its dark form can become just your family, just your neighborhood, just your circle. It's a kind of solipsism. So here are some quotes from there which are quite philosophical and which I thought I should include in this. So we come to know the truth about a lot of things as every human life is worth the same and worth saving. All rights, all human beings have equal rights. These are all really good examples of natural law. Perhaps those who are best suited to power are those who have never sought it. It matters not what someone is born, but what they grow to be. So Snape had some really good ones as well. Do not pity the dead, pity the living, and above all, those who live without love. We don't need magic to change the world. We carry all the power we need inside ourselves already. We have the power to imagine it, the better. So J.K. Rowling definitely was initiated into a lot of the real happening of, she knew what is happening. I mean, to some extent, I don't know, I don't know what level. So most of these people are given the job to put out all this information in a children's book kind of way, in a very just for children, to tell them like a morality lesson. But even then, they don't really say, nowhere in Harry Potter does it say that natural law is to not steal. It says don't steal, but uh, the other prerequisite knowledge is kind of important to understand morality. And if it is taught young, we can change the world tomorrow. So even a house elf like Dobby understands natural law. I didn't mean to kill anyone. Dobby only meant to maim or seriously injure. This can be found even in the darkest of times, even if one remembers to turn on the light. So, so if you add the number 9 3/4, you get the number 7, which is a self-realized human, a person who's understood that he has the power to create reality, and he's a part of this creation, and he understands his rights, and he's a sovereign being. So some more, I've gone a little overboard here with the quotes, but this is one of my favorites. It takes a great deal of courage to stand up to your enemies, but even more to stand up to your friends. Brilliant one. So we have to get down to what right and wrong is. Right is based in truth. It's moral, it's in harmony with natural law, and actions from based on it do not result in harm. So this is Harry's path and this is Voldemort's path. So knowing rights are most easily understood when they are considered through apophatic inquiry. This process helps us to understand what a right actually is by understanding what actions are not rights because they cause to harm. So this is a process of negation. So even though it has the word negative in it, it's actually a very positive thing. You'll see why, because most of us already do this or have done this in crucial points in our life where we decided we had to make choices and we chose something by the process of negation. I don't want this, I don't want this, I don't want this, you know, and then, but I want this. So it's a process of coming to know that through the process of apophasis. It's from the Greek to say no. So it's a method of logical reasoning employed when given a limited set of possibilities in order to arrive at knowledge by way of the exclusion of known negatives. So describing what something is by explaining what it is not. Affirmation through negation. Really, like if you really want to break down what natural law is, it is violation of another person's life, property, or their rights. Okay, so taking of murder is taking of another's life. Assault is taking another's by force. Rape is taking another's free will by force. Theft is taking another's property. Trespass is getting someone's right to privacy. So these are all coercion, what's happening now with the clot shots, and deception, which is lying to us by omission, by not telling us the whole truth and only giving us one side of it, one version of it, which is not the whole thing and which gives a skewed understanding of what it really is. So every harmful action that a human being is capable of taking is a form of theft. Some form of property is always being stolen when a wrongdoing is committed. Life is a form of property, rights are a form of property, freedom is a form of property. So when you take someone's rights away, you're taking away their freedom. Take away someone's life, you're violating their rights. So life, rights, freedom, truth, love, freedom. So we can only get to true love, which is love for every other being on this planet, having compassion, having that's true love, not just love for your girlfriend or your boyfriend or your family or your tribe or your colleagues, or it's love for the whole world. It's love for every being, even a spider, which is mistakenly come on my path. I don't want to squash him, right? Like that's how universe operates. And actually, once you come to know these things, you kind of become more conscious of beings around you and how your actions are causing harm. So, so all forms of natural law transgressions are a form of theft. They're wrongdoings. It's our choices, Harry, that show us who we truly are, far more than our ability. Living being on or their property must have been harmed in order for a violation of natural law or a wrongdoing to have taken place. Any action which does not cause such harm is a right. No victim, no crime. So there's no such thing as delegation of a wrong. So if a specific action is not a right for one individual, so you don't think that your neighbor should put flowers in her outside her house. Uh, you can't delegate that right to a government and say, BBMP, please come and make sure my neighbor does not grow flowers in her garden, right? So you can't, I mean, you're clearly violating her space, her property, her. So you can't get the government to do that. If you can't do that, the government has no right to do it either. If it's wrong for you, then nobody else should do that as well. So that's what natural law is ultimately about. So natural law holds good, doesn't matter what the population belief system is. So a wrong cannot be turned into a right, and a right can't be turned into a wrong just because some people say it is by law or whatever, right? So most human beings erroneously believe that it is morally possible for them to create and delegate rights which do not exist, or to take away rights which do exist. So when in doubt as to whether an action is or is not in harmony with natural law, visualize the scenario of a world with only two people. The behavior is either a right or a wrong in that instance. It remains a right or a wrong in any size population, regardless of how many people will believe otherwise. So that is literally morality in a slide. You can this is bulletproof, guys. Like imagine this scenario every time you have a moral dilemma about. In Harry Potter, it was all about magic is might, and when Voldemort came to power, they put muggles at the bottommost end, basically crushing them literally, right? And the people who are not aware of the system in place, the ones on top, are these people here. Same, the muggles, the uninitiated, the dead. The same system is being replicated in the human world, not just in the wizard world. Even they didn't get the whole picture right. Like they tried to, I mean, there have been a lot of societies which did not have a government, and they thrived and survived. And this ultimately brings me to the two pillars of enlightenment. This is the sacred feminine, the non-aggression principle. Do not engage in violence. In other words, do not morally initiate non-rightful use of physical power to coerce, constrain, or compel the rightful physical behavior or free will choice of another sentient being. The second one, or the self-defense principle. Sentient beings have the inherent right to use force to defend themselves from violence conducted upon them by another. So it's both. We have been told that this is the job of people we call order followers, people in the police and military who blindly follow orders. We have delegated our responsibility of this to them. So when these two come together is the Star of Solomon, which represents a being aware, doing the actions and speaking the words, which are these two very hidden, very occulted pieces of information. That's why a wizard always carries a wand. It's the principle of self-defense and the non-aggression together. You wield the power. How you use it defines what kind of person you are. Do you live by natural law? Do you harm other people? Do you assault people? Do you steal other people's property? Do you violate another being's will, free will? Do you harm animals? And Dobby is ultimately about anarchy, because even in a wizard world, they have a system of slavery here where um, these guys have been pushed to the bottom rung. They are the slave labor, and the way they can actually get free is when the owner gives them some clothes. So Harry actually uses that principle to free Dobby, who is kind of an anarchist himself. So when Harry does that, he says that no masters, and that's what real freedom is about. No, freedom is actually a state where we don't have any external masters. We own ourselves, and that's what anarchy and true ownership and sovereignty is about. The natural law expressions into the world are a positive one or a negative one. So Harry Potter, they didn't get to the either extreme. They were over here, and Harry Potter defeating Voldemort didn't really solve anything. The they still had chaos because they didn't really get away with the government. That's what true ownership is about. Like, so when you own a wand, it's like a firearm or a pepper spray or something you use to defend yourself as well as assert your will, your action in accordance to natural law, the higher case W will. So that is what rightful possession, responsibility, training to use it. That's why wizards have to go to school to learn how to use a wand, even though they can buy one at Ollivander's. The rightful possession, this is what true ownership of something is. This is what true responsibility for yourself is. So natural law can be broken down into don't steal. This is basically the very, very short version of natural law is don't steal. That's why it requires some amount of prerequisite information to understand this, because otherwise, thanks to all the programming each of us have been generously given since the time we came out, it's really hard to understand this, even though each of us intuitively know this, or are knowing this. Conscience is coming to know something together. Okay, because what is the point if I know about morality and you don't, or the rest of the world doesn't? If we want to increase the aggregate freedom in this world, as shown in this amazing slide, which shows the two polarities, and the polarity we are in and we have been under for a long time now is this. We are in the fear chaos cycle. And to get out of there, we need to have the courage to be responsible, and most importantly, it's going to be chaos, but it won't be the chaos which the dark occultists of the world wants. Chaos is actually a teacher. The reason we are perpetuating the same cycles is because we aren't aware. Our mistakes and the mistakes as well as the good things we've done, humanity as a species, have been hidden away from us. We've been given the wrong idols, the wrong heroes, and of course it'll manifest into something like the current state. So conscience is what it's really about. Harry Potter is ultimately about a person with an awakened conscience, with, even if he didn't have the best hand, so to speak, if life was a deck of cards, he was aware. I mean, he had the worst childhood ever. I think he didn't even know his parents were murdered until the night Hagrid came and told him that his parents were not really killed in an accident. So the free will choice of right action or wrong action, once the definitive knowledge of the objective difference between right and wrong according to natural law has been acquired, is when each of us can exercise our conscience. Freedom and morality are directly proportional. As morality increases, freedom increases. As morality declines, freedom declines. So this is why you cannot fight the mandates and the tyranny which is happening right now at the surface without understanding what natural law, what law of freedom is. There is a law for this. There is a way true freedom manifests in this universe, and this is it. This is a solution. The solution is philosophical, and that's why a lot of people do not want to get into this, because this involves using your left and right brain in harmony, firing in all cylinders, and then you get the big picture. Another way of stating this law would be to say that the presence of truth and morality in the lives of the people at any given society is inversely proportional to the presence of tyranny and slavery in that society. So this is literally the solution to humanity's problem at the root cause. This here on your screen is it. This is it. So true freedom can never exist in a society that embraces moral relativism, which is The idea that there is no inherent and objective difference between right and wrong. So humanity may arbitrarily create or decide right and wrong for themselves through something called the Constitution. So I was a constitutionalist all my life. I too thought, the same way you probably are thinking right now about the state, because you don't have the whole picture. We have, I mean, a life without government is something they don't even want us to imagine. And there's not a single book or a movie where this actually is shown like that, where there's no monarchy, where they don't want us to even imagine that, because that is the end of them. That is the end of the dark occultists of this world. They cannot, they cannot. Um, so natural law and man's law, similar to how they had. So inside the human system, they had a human government and a human law. I don't like to call it human law, because human law is actually natural law. Man's law is what, or the government's law is what, which is a fake one. It's a construct, just like how money is printed out of thin air. So if any law is made in harmony with natural law, then it's understood that it's inherent and pre-existing and self-evident. Therefore, it's not even necessary. So if a particular man-made law is in opposition to natural law, then it follows logically that it is false and immoral, and in other words, wrong. Therefore, it cannot be legitimately binding upon anyone. A really great understanding of Harry never cared much for man's law or the Hogwarts law, or in a way, he was an anarchist, even though he ended up becoming an author and working for the Department of Magic later on. So that's what I meant. That there is not a single piece of literature, book, movie where they show a positive scenario where there is no government and there's actually a natural law based spiritual anarchic society, which is based on voluntarism, agorism, and true principles of truth, love, and freedom. So natural law is based on principles and truth. Man's law is based on dogmatic beliefs, constructs of mind, like money and government, and it's harmonized with due to knowledge and understanding, and man's law is complied with due to fear of punishment. It's so you do something in harmony with true conscience. You have nothing to fear, even though it might so-called break into this really weird, really arbitrary system which changes from place to place and can be changed anytime by a few people signing a piece of paper. So natural law is eternal and immutable. It exists and applies for as long as the universe exists and cannot be changed. Man's law changes with time based upon the whim of legislators. So belief in government and belief in the man's law legal system and belief in organized religion are all hallmarks of true Satanism in this reality. So Hogwarts can also be thought of as planet Earth, the absolute power being the Deathly Hallows with the Elder Wand, which is something Harry gives away, just like the ring in Lord of the Rings, which is thrown away, which is discarded at the. So Horcruxes are actually manifestations of violation of natural law, and so Deathly Harrow is basically it's a metaphor for how we have to behave in this world and how we are to conduct ourselves as spiritual beings I mean, you heard this phrase very often. You hear it very often. We are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. That is really what it is. And as new agey as it sounds, or whatever you think of that term, that is what it is. We are here to build a soul, and building a soul is learning conscience, learning natural law, knowing the difference between right and wrong. That's what real spirituality is. It's not something esoteric, something, I mean, you have to study the esoteric books. I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. I'm saying it's something as simple as that. So Harry Potter is a treatise on morality, natural law, and overcoming base consciousness to becoming base consciousness to divine consciousness. So just like when Voldemort came back and nobody believed Harry, but there were, even though he witnessed it twice, actually, he survived the first time, and the second time he survived. He got back before he could be murdered by Voldemort. We are the guys in the room here who know what's happening in the world, who kind of have a picture of what's happening. And we have to learn how to defend ourselves against the dark arts, against the dark spiritual warfare that's being waged on us. Like true spirituality, no one's talking about it. Like, look at the spiritual leaders of India, like Sadhguru, Ravi Shankar. None of them are talking spirituality. They are peddling lies. None of them are even talking about. Mark Passio is the only person. He's actually a spiritual teacher, but he's been given all kinds of labels. So you have to understand his work and keep aside your perceptions of what you think of him, what you've been told, or what you read online about him. The material is being researched, put out there, and it's your responsibility to take it in, because we are lucky to have it, to have information. We are faced with adversity, but we have the tools to overcome it. Knowledge is a weapon. Technology is a weapon. We have to use it against the ones who are pulling the strings behind the scenes. Okay, so we have to be Dumbledore's army. I'd like to conclude by saying that, and hope you enjoyed this presentation. Thank you for watching.